Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to invite Erika into our studio today to take a deep dive into the genius of wonder and the importance of wonder in the workplace and in our lives, because, it's all about we're a whole person, not just the people that come to work. And how do we take this idea of wonder and keep it alive in us more? And Erika has always been a soldier for wonder, always in our company anyway, worked very hard through her tenure to make sure that we kept this alive and kicking. So I invited her back today because I thought it would be nice to hear a little bit about why this is important and also some tips at the end on how you can incorporate this and use this to spark conversation with your employees or with you and to make your life a little more full of curiosity and fun. So Erika, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today and to talk about wonder. What a wonderful topic. I just love it.
So to kick it off, why don't you talk about what you think of, or maybe as your definition of wonder, how you use to describe it so people know what we're talking about.
Well, it's so great because I think wonder, similar to love, is one of those things that people think doesn't belong in the workplace necessarily, or is at best an afterthought. Whereas I'm a firm believer that wonder must stay present in the workplace. And just like so much of the other topics that we speak on here, it's something that really good leaders can actually actively cultivate. But it takes intentional effort. So one of my favorite quotes is Socrates, the beginning of wisdom is wonder. And I think that to me really is the essence and heart of everything that we will ever talk about when we're talking about wonder, is that if we're seeking wisdom, if we're seeking growth, if we're seeking evolution of any kind, and as a leader, I would hope we're seeking all of those things. Mm-hmm. The beginning of those things, the starting place, that starting line is wonder. Because wonder, somebody once said, wonder is curiosity in action. And I love that expression because it really is this sort of challenge or invitation to open your eyes to curiosity and really seek out is what wonder is to me when we're talking specifically about in the workplace.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that we teach all the time, and certainly even more so now than ever, is the 6 types of working genius. And it's very interesting that the first genius in the scheme of work, right? If you don't know the 6 types of working genius, you can listen to our numerous podcasts on it. But one of the things that it does is it starts with, you basically have 6 stages of work. And the first stage of work, as they define it, is wonder. And the genius of wonder comes into play. And I love that idea that it's the beginning of everything. That way they use, it's kind of people with the genius of wonder love to ask questions and speculate on things like, is there a better way? Or why are we always doing things the way we are? Or they like to sit in that kind of ambiguity and imagine possibilities. And a lot of times those questions within an organization, those questions permeate change. That's what creates the stages for people to invent and problem solve and come up with things. I find the biggest problem, though, is that there are not as many generally wanderers within organizations as there are other geniuses. So it tends to get rolled over very quickly, or there's rarely time to sit in ambiguity and ponder questions of like, what could we be doing if we weren't doing this? What could we be doing differently? What does the future look like? It's interesting because when we do the working genius assessments, the companies that tend to have a lot of people with wonder tend to be like startups or, software companies, biotech companies, people that are really pushing the envelope into like, this doesn't exist yet, but it could potentially, right? And there's a lot of risk there. And sometimes, those are the kind of people that attracts. But you can have wanderers in all your businesses. We see a lot of it in marketing, in fashion, in media, in content development and creation. But really, I think what you're saying is that everybody could have it. Like every department, for sure, everybody should be cultivating this.
100%. It's so funny that you said that. It makes total sense to me that the startups are where you are seeing the wanderers in action. And not to speak completely in a generalizing way, but because the startups have no predefined notion of what's right or wrong or the status quo. So I think what happens is in more established organizations or places where people have worked for years and years and years, there's perhaps a forgetting that there is a place for wonder, because what happens is, oh, we're just going through, this is how we do business. Whereas a startup, everything is fresh. So it's all about the great big adventure of what might happen. Whereas in the established organization, it's not there as much. So I think it's so smart that the working genius starts with wonder to remind us, sort of to get back to that reminder that, because what would normally happen if we were thinking about the start of a project and we didn't have any idea of the working genius, we would start with the idea of a vision, right? Something like that, a vision or a brainstorm. We'd say, well, that's the beginning. That's how you start a thing. And that's certainly accurate, but the wonder is the step before, because the vision still includes kind of answers or expectations. The brainstorm often falls into, oh, let's just roll around ideas that we've always rolled around. But whereas wonder is, it's wide open. It's wide open.
Wide open and not necessarily efficient. You
can't stay in wonder forever. You can't stay in wonder forever.
It takes longer and you can't quantify it. So it can be difficult in the modern workplace to like structure and allow time for that, because it feels sometimes to people, especially if you're uncomfortable with it, it feels like you might be wasting time, when in fact it might be the most important time. I mean, I'll come clean. It is very hard for me when I feel I have a lot of responsibilities on my plate, a lot of people to make sure I pay, a lot of things to make sure happen, a lot of bottom line numbers to hit. I often skip over this.
Yeah.
And luckily I have somebody on my team for years who was very good at coming into my office and saying, hey, listen, we got to stop for a minute. We got to just think about these kind of bigger things. And inevitably she would open up her notebook and she would have drawings and pictures and notes, and it wouldn't be organized and it wouldn't be in bullet points, but it would be sometimes pictures or thoughts or just questions. And she'd be like, I'm thinking about this theme for some reason, or it's sticking out to me, or I'm feeling like a lot of people are feeling this way. And I'd be like, what? And then I'd have to take a minute. And sometimes I would defend against it. Oftentimes I would. Like, what is she talking about? And then inevitably I would go home and that would be going over in my mind, like on my subway ride home or wherever. I'd be thinking about those things that she said. And then usually by the next day or so, I'd be like, she's right. We got to address this in our next meeting, or we need to do something about this at our retreat, or something, was really powerful.
Well, and I think a lot of leaders have that same kind of initial resistance or pushback as you do. And that's why I started by saying it's the same as love in the workplace. People that resist against sort of the idea of emotionally intelligent leadership, it's too touchy-feely. I don't need to connect with the human. Let's just get our job done. Whereas 9.9 times out of 10, if they will do what you did and ride home on the subway or drive home in the car and think about what's the larger benefit here, the larger benefit to the connection, to the task, is always going to outweigh the few extra minutes that you don't have time for to connect with the human, to spend time in wonder. There was a great article in Forbes magazine, this organizational psychologist. It's a few years back, but she talked about wonder in the workplace. And I pulled out one of the paragraphs from it when I was thinking about this, because exactly this, we forget how powerful or potent it is. She says wonder is especially important in today's volume-focused organizational culture where questioning is no longer encouraged. A shortcut to an agreement and to reach a target is the ultimate expectation. It's a fact that the majority of our work cultures are more concerned with the survival of status quo and enforcement of values that support absolute order and to reach the KPI, rather than diversity of thought, emotions, experience, and a unified rejoice of discovery. I love that. A unified rejoice of discovery. She says, as an organizational psychologist, I find this predictable path of unthinking routine and I have the answers in me attitude far more of a threat to business sustainability and human evolution over any imagined competition. So then she goes on to say the act of wonder, not only looking but beholding a space, growing the required comfort to sit with attentive and focused awareness and without judgment, may be the key forward. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So she says, you asked about wonder. I said curiosity and action, and this quote of, the beginning of wisdom is wonder. She talks about the scientific definition of wonder.
What's her name, Erika? I feel like we should give her credit.
Yeah, we should. Cecil Peer.
Okay.
And it's from April 29th, 2019. So it's a few years back.
We'll put a link in the episode notes as well.
It's a really great article to reference if you're listening and you're even a little bit piqued in your own curiosity about wonder, and you're maybe sort of still on the fence of I'm kind of digging the idea of wonder, but does it belong in the workplace? I'm not sure. This is a great one that might push you over the edge. She says the scientific definition of wonder holds 3 facets: our ability to find, recognize, and take pleasure in the existence of goodness in the physical and social worlds, an active engagement with and responsiveness to artistic, moral, and natural beauty, including the excellent skills and talents of others, and an active responsiveness through both cognition and emotion, engagement from both mind and heart. So she's really highlighting this idea that if we engage fully as humans and really engage in this willingness to see the beauty, to see the possibility in the project, in the person, that idea of wonder gets us out of that trap of just, I'm going through the routines, I'm trying to hit those targets, I'm not even thinking, I'm just doing. Whereas I think what a lot of the startups you're seeing understand is we can't get so caught up in the doing that we miss the building of something beautiful together. And I think wonder is the key there.
Yeah, I think the problem can also be if you don't have it, if you don't allow time for it at work, you can be a company that is slow to recognize that change needs to happen. And you can actually lose footing against your competition, or you can be slow to take up whatever is changing about the world, whether it was, in the recent past, whether it was, how do we deal with COVID and those who just kept going and refused to ask questions, and really suffered, or it could be like we're just going to keep in like a hamster wheel doing the same thing because it's always worked, when in fact there's the only constant is change. I think we do have to have the discipline to sit in questions longer than we're comfortable with, and structure that time, because it's not going to happen naturally unless you just happen to have a lot of people who have wonder as, a genius that are sitting next to you, because it is not the most common genius by far in most workplaces. How do you do it? Like, how do you cultivate it? Even in your personal life. I mean, let's face it, when you were talking and reading, I was thinking like, this is true in my personal life. How many times do I'm like, I need to rethink how I'm doing that. I'm doing the same thing and I'm getting this same results,
Insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your personal life. So there's a book that I love that's called The Wonder Switch, by a magician, speaker, author called Harris III. So his book, The Wonder Switch, is really, I mean, it's for personal mostly, but you can apply it professionally. So the fact that you ask, how do you do it in your personal life? I think it's important because it is one of those topics that we lose it everywhere. It's not just, in this workplace, I left wonder at the door. We can get into complacency in our personal life too, and not even realize that the wonder switch in us has turned off entirely. I'll answer the how do you do it, but I want to read another snippet too from his book, because it's really important just to think about how we're even thinking about wonder. So I hope people listening will even just think about how they're thinking about it would be a great start, because the first thing is we're not even thinking about wonder. It's not something that we're actively or intentionally bringing into our mind. So he's talking about confirmation bias. You find what you look for, right? So a lot of times we have these beliefs. So a belief about how the workplace should run, a belief about how our life should run, a belief about who we are as people. And then we seek evidence in the world to confirm that belief that we've established. So he's talking about, what we believe tends to inform what we see, even if what we believe isn't true. We're in search of information to confirm the stories, the ones that we tell ourselves. But what else might change about our lives if we change what we believe? So if we expose the lies, those stories that we're telling, or the information that we're gathering that's not necessarily true, and believe the truth about who we are and what we're capable of being, might we be able to see things we couldn't see before? Is there magic, real magic all around you, even inside you, that's been there all along? It's been in plain sight, but your belief system has blinded you to it. So he talks about one of my favorite quotes that you've heard me share many times, Christine. It's Roald Dahl, who said, "Those who don't believe in the magic will never find it." That if you live as if seeing is believing, you'll be easily deceived and you'll have a cynical attitude and you'll walk around thinking, I'll believe it when I see it. So the magical question is believing before you see it. So believe it in order to see it. So wonder is what gives you permission to believe in what you currently do not see. So if you choose to believe, or allow your wonder to be reawakened so that you have the permission to believe, then you'll begin to see magic everywhere, even in the mirror. So his idea about wonder for you personally is believing that magic is possible. So in the workplace, that translates to believing that anything is possible. Let's try this new thing. Let's go on this new path. Let's do things completely differently, even though I cannot see the ending. And I think that's such an important part of wonder and why it's so scary for us. It's scary for us in the workplace. It's scary for us in our personal life is I want to see it and then I'll believe it. Like I want to see that it's all going to work out. I'm going to see the end of the story, but wonder doesn't live there when it's all just scripted out and you see everything. That's just status quo. So wonder lives in, I believe in this. I don't see it yet. But I believe so fully. And I'm going to embrace this great what if, which is such an important, powerful, what do you do? How do you ignite wonder? The very first thing I would recommend is this, like allowing yourself to live in the what if, the magic of the what if. Wouldn't it be cool if? And really holding on to that kind of sparkle of possibility without knowing how the ending's going to go.
Without knowing, because especially I think that it can become very negative. Like you could just say, I know. I know this. I've done this my whole life. This is what happens. It always ends up bad. This is what we know. Stop thinking about what it could be. I've done that before, you dummies. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like whatever those voices are in your head, just keep the status quo exactly the way it is or worse.
Because that's safe, right? To keep it the way it is, even if it's not great, is safe. It's known. It's comfortable. So why would I get out of that? I know what to expect, even if I'm miserable.
It's known and it's comfortable, but I would argue that you think it's safe, but it's not because you're actually losing market share. You're losing the future. You're losing out on possibility. And if you're not growing, you're dying. So in business, it's actually not safe. It's the lie we tell ourselves that it is safe. It's comfortable and it's good to, like to know what we're doing, but you don't. I love that idea of like sitting in possibility.
Without knowing.
What if?
And to your point, the sort of, you have to get outside of the answers. For wonder to be cultivated, you have to live in the questions. You have to live in the questions. Wonder lives in all of the questions, beginning with what if? Wouldn't it be cool if? What would happen if? What might be possible here? How could we look at this differently? All of those kinds of questions are fantastic sort of dirt soil to start to build something new in wonder. And so asking more questions is probably, if somebody is listening and they're like, well, what's one thing? What's one thing I can do? Start asking those kinds of questions. Start asking more questions of any kind. Don't just, this is what I do today because it's what I did yesterday. Because that, to your point, eventually you're not even going to notice, not that you're not growing, but that you're falling backwards in your personal life and in your professional life, with your business, with your team. So again, for the working genius model, to have wonder be at the start was a stroke of genius for sure.
Well, it is true. So let's talk about some tips for everybody out there on how to spark genius, whether it's for yourself or within your teams, because it does, I think, take some intention in most people. Some people do it naturally, but for most of us, it takes being a little bit intentional. So what's one tip that you have for people?
Well, so in Harvard Business Review, so people write about wonder in places that you wouldn't think they would write about wonder. Dr. Karen Rivich, who writes about resilience a lot, she's an author on resilience, co-wrote an article talking about awe and wonder and why you need to protect your sense of wonder in the workplace. And she and her co-author recommend, because wonder is so strange to activate in the workplace or unnatural, to take wonder or awe walks. Because we can much more easily identify a feeling of awe or wonder when we're outside or when we're in nature, when we're visiting a place. That connects with us. We understand that. So it's not foreign to us. But suddenly you put us in our cubicle and we're like, where's wonder here? But so to actually go on a wonder walk, they recommend sending your team on a wonder walk. And really those kind of walks where you are either pondering a challenge or a problem that you might have been given before the walk, to be given a very specific awe-inducing or wonder-inspiring question, like find what's beautiful in your surroundings. Find something unexpected on your walk. What can you see differently as you walk? So doing something that's more naturally awe-inducing and then coming back. So this is a great prompt to do right at the start if you're going to be doing any kind of visioning activity with your team, a strategic planning session with your team, a company retreat, a full staff meeting, something where you're all going to be together for business. A really great tip that is inspired by Dr. Rivich is that sort of start with the wonder walk, because then you're shifting their brain chemistry before you start. So that's one.
I love it. And it takes them out of, looking at their computers, which gets them their minds a little bit more open. Someone, I can't remember who taught me this, but I've done it with folks before and it's great. One of my tips is to have just a question brainstorm. So you put a timer on because it's very uncomfortable for people not to answer questions. So you put a timer on, you say, we're just going to have 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or depending on how many people in the meeting, right? If it's just two of you, maybe it's 2 minutes. But if there's a good amount of people, 10 minutes are on the clock. They can see the countdown if possible. And all you're allowed to do is ask questions about whatever it is, the problem that you're dealing with, or the client, or the possibility, or the opportunity. And you can only ask questions. And a lot of people will have questions that are really veiled suggestions, like, have you tried da 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 da. But mostly people will start.
Don't you think it would be better if you
did? But we can laugh at ourselves because you realize right away how hard it is to ask a genuine question where you don't know the answer. And it can start with those kind of what if questions, and you can start with what if we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams.
Yes.
Right? Because most people think, what if we fail? That's the thing that's in the back of most people's head. And then you can just get people asking questions, and you have a facilitator there, or you yourself, that just say not a question in a fun way. And you just try to get to questions and not answer.
Yeah.
And then you can go into the part of your brainstorm where you come up with solutions. But I love just a little bit for a question brainstorm. What's another tip you have?
Well, that's so good. This is the same tip worded differently. So Harris III, also from the Wonder Switch, says a phrase that I've repeated now hundreds and dozens and millions of times. Don't crush the wow with how. And it's the same tip, but I want to say it differently, because the actual tip I want to give is write that expression on a Post-it and put it in anywhere you need this reminder. Don't crush the wow with how, because what he's talking about is with wonder, it needs the space to cultivate. As we've been talking about, it needs air to breathe. But too often we're so uncomfortable in the wonder moment that we try to get right to the practical bits and bobs of action and to-do list and tasks, because that feels more comfortable to what we should be doing in the workplace. So the tip of don't crush the wow with how,
love it,
is don't get to this is what we're going to do. Christine, you're going to do that. I'm going to do that. Okay, here's our deadline.
How are we going to make this happen?
Yeah. And what he's very clearly saying is, and what you've said too, is it's not that we never get there. Wonder and wow and awe are not places that we live forever. They're places where dreams are born. We need to spend some time in that space. So don't crush the wow with how. Put that, if you're someone who you yourself as the leader or your team tend to get right into the practical, make that a big sign at the start of your next meeting. If somebody comes to you with an idea, don't crush their wow. Allow the wow space to breathe is the tip.
I love it. Yeah, that's so true, because one time we were brainstorming what we could do with like a meeting that we were having, and someone had this idea of like, oh, we should take everybody to the planetarium and then we can go into this whole thing. And then of course, we're going, well, how? We can't afford that, And someone said, we didn't use those words. It would have been good to have those words. Don't crush the wow with how. But someone said, just let it go. Like, let's see where this takes us. Even though part of me was like, oh my God, this is so expensive. Like, I'm imagining. But what we ended up with, if I just trusted the process, what we ended up with is like someone bought online a little machine that puts stars on the ceiling for $14.99 or something.
Exactly.
And we turned off the lights and put yoga mats on the floor, and we made our own planetarium that people walked into. But I would never have got there if someone didn't stop me from crushing it. You know what I mean? So it was a good reminder.
That's a perfect example
of what can happen, right? So my next one is 2 questions that you can use for people that you have in your office that actually have a lot of wonder. But the thing that is interesting that comes with people who have wonder naturally is they also tend, not always, but they tend to be quieter. And so they don't always assert themselves to pushing for it, because it's not always appreciated in the workplace, right? Because it does slow things down, and people generally don't like to slow down, right? They don't feel like they have time for it. So a couple of questions that you can use to like elicit people with wonder to get you going are these. Like, what do you see, let's say Erika, as the real opportunity or problem we should be solving for? So that you stop whatever brainstorm of problem solving and you start to just open up some space for that. And then also just to say, Erika, what do you think we're missing here? And to like give some air to it and just sit backwards, like lean in to say the question and then sit back to allow space to like, we're going to sit here. We're not putting you on the spot. We're actually open to like asking some bigger questions of the universe a little bit. So those are my 2 for sparking those people.
Well, that's so good. That last one reminded me of the 5 whys exercise. I feel like Toyota did it. I can't remember. This is something that Tom Armstrong would know if he were here with us today. But the 5 whys, it's exactly that you ask. So if you said to me, Erika, we've got a problem. We need to hire 5 more staff today. And I would say, why? And you would say, because we have this big project and we're understaffed. And I would say, why? And so the 5 whys gets down to, distills the place of what you were saying, Christine, which is what's the real problem? Sometimes we are so reactionary that we're not even living in a conscious awareness of what the real challenge or the real opportunity is. And doing 5 whys in a row helps you not only kind of dig down to what really is going on in the opportunity, the challenge, but it also activates the wonder portion of your brain because you start to get more curious. If curiosity is the actual tool that we need to ignite our wonder, we actually have to practice what does that mean to ignite our curiosity and how do I do that? And how do I maybe do it artificially at first if it's not coming naturally? And so the 5 whys is a way to do that.
Great. I love that. The 5 whys. Okay. Those are some great tips. And I think it's great to do that even with your friends. I'm going to be with my girlfriends and if we're going through a problem that we have, why not just go through 5 whys? Yeah. That's great.
One of again, because curiosity is such an important facet of cultivating wonder, and you really have to approach whatever it is with a beginner's mind. And that's so hard for so many of us to do, whether we're experienced in age, experienced at an organization, and that we can get into, as you pointed out a bit ago, like we can get into knowing. And I have the answers and I'm comfortable. I know exactly what to do here, what to say here, what to expect here. But that wonder requires you to shed all of that and really try to approach something from a beginner's mind. One more tip is to tend to your environment. So look around your environment and see, is this a space where wonder could easily be cultivated? Or is this a space that is just promoting, do the tasks, get in, get out, get the job done? So most leaders, no matter what kind of space you have, can probably incorporate a few items in your environment to cultivate wonder, whether it's whiteboards, sticky notes, those kind of creativity brainstorming tools. If those are visually on display, in addition to having maybe some of those catchphrases that we've talked about actually visually displayed on your walls, don't crush the wow with how, whatever it might be. But to have a space where just walking into the environment, you're like, oh, I just suddenly want to think about things, is a really good opportunity that's easy for anyone to do.
Yes. And put it on your agenda. We're going to have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, of wonder time. And
of wonder.
Yeah. Intentional wonder. I love it. Erika, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thanks for diving into wonder with us a little bit this morning. And everybody out there, try adding a little of sprinkle. Start with a sprinkle and then maybe a downpour of wonder and see how it goes. Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.